I hear. I'm recording. Okay. We're back with the legendary Bill Weinberg of the Counter Vortex podcast, human rights journalist, award-winning journalist, I should say, who covers conflicts and human rights violations in places most people have never even heard of. How are you, Bill?
Getting tired, but let's keep going.
Okay. So we have covered the origin of the phenomenon of the Tankies, meaning the degeneration of the left, which once had a utopian vision of a more perfect world, but often we find that the left has been supporting dictators ranging from Stalin to Mao to Bashar Assad, and lately Vladimir Putin. So, Bill, how do we account for all of these people from the left who are more interested in attacking NATO than in helping the Ukrainian people defend themselves? What's up with all that?
Well, I mean, we've been talking about that for the past hour or whatever it's been, hasn't it?
Why?
Well, but we've been analyzing it, haven't we? I mean, it's the intellectually corrosive effects of the enforced double standard of the Noam Chomsky rule, which, you're not supposed to talk about any crimes carried out by any entity other than U.S. imperialism. And, if you don't talk about them, then they're kind of like out of sight, out of mind, which renders you vulnerable to being exploited by, the actual war propaganda of the contending powers.
I feel still puzzled. We understand these people are wrong and they're putting out bullshit, but it's puzzling why so many people buy into this. It's clear Bashar Assad is not an attractive player.
Bashar Assad, yes.
Bashar, excuse me. Nor is Vladimir Putin. Nevertheless, there are so many people who are willing to buy into this line about NATO expansion provoked him. He's only trying to protect Russia's flank, and on and on and on. And then they latch on because there's 900 guys in this battalion, and they like the Wolfsangel insignia. They think it's badass, and they got some nasty ass tattoos. Which last time I checked, there's guys with nasty tattoos all over the world, and yet the left seems ready to buy Putin's line because you've got, a few hundred of.
It's such a double standard. I mean, it's too ridiculous to even talk about. You would hope, except that everybody's obsessed with it.
Well,
I mean, you're going to find just as many guys wearing, fascist symbol tattoos among the Russian-backed separatist forces in Donbass.
Well, that's absolutely true. It's been documented.
Of course. And
I mean, the guy who's the leader of the Donetsk Republic.
The Azov Battalion, I would imagine, first of all, if we're going to talk about the Azov Battalion, the first thing you have to acknowledge is that its original founding far-right leadership back in 2014 were purged when it became a part of it was actually absorbed into the Ukrainian National Guard.
I don't know if purged is the right word for Beletsky left to pursue political ambitions. He did moderate his rhetoric according to leading experts. I don't know if it purged.
I'm perfectly willing to believe that, that was mostly just PR. But, the point is that there's, first, there's just as many ugly fascistic paramilitary groups on the Russian side, like the Wagner group and all of these Cossack formations and the Night Wolves.
Some of these Chechens are pretty rough characters too.
And furthermore, it is Ukraine, the popular, contrary to the popular belief on the left, which sees the Maidan Revolution of 2014 as a Nazi coup, quote unquote, which is baseless, Orwellian garbage. Ukraine has actually been moving in a more democratic direction since 2014. Okay, it has had peaceful transfers of power. There's normal elections which happen at regular intervals. whereas I know, and there are actual opposition parties and so on. Whereas Russia has, seen a consolidating dictatorship over this same period. Vladimir Putin's power has only become more consolidated, and there's more centralization of power against the strong man who has been ruling either as president or prime minister since 1999. And it's Russia, not Ukraine, which has seen a massive crackdown on dissidents in civil society. It's Russia, which is moving in a fascistic direction, and Ukraine, which has been moving in a more democratic direction. It's a complete reversal of reality.
That's true. I think they latch on to isolated incidents, isolated factoids that bolster their case. And these factoids, in and of themselves, may have a grain of truth. For instance, a lot of them complain about Ukrainian government shutting down Russian government-sponsored propaganda networks operating in Ukraine. And considering that Russia has been waging violent war on Ukraine ever since 2014, in my opinion, it's justifiable in a time of war that if you have a so-called quote unquote news agency.
Whether it's justifiable or it isn't, pointing to that while ignoring the draconian law which was just passed in Russia, which actually imposes a 15-year prison sentence, not only for protesting the war, but even for calling it a war.
Or even holding a blank sign in Red Square,
exactly.
Whatever they call it now. Yeah. And then
in protest of the censorship, and in protest of the repression against the anti-war protest in Russia, people have actually, been taken to the street holding up blank signs as a kind of a statement about the censorship and the repression, kind of an ironic statement. And then they were actually arrested for that.
That's correct. And then there was a woman who was actually pro Putin, who went out and spoke to the reporter and asked the reporter if the reporter was willing to hear a pro Putin, a pro Russia side of the story. And the cops jumped on her and dragged her away.
Yeah, we've all seen the video. And then
so
it's all this talk about Ukraine is a Nazi state, and that Russia is waging some kind of war of denazification is the most perversely Orwellian, utter, not just distortion, but complete reversal of reality. I mean, people who buy this just are not paying any attention at all. They're just living entirely in a pro-Kremlin confirmation bias bubble. And,
I agree that they're in a bubble and they're biased, but I don't think all of them are not paying any attention, because some of them actually will provide detailed knowledge. They'll give you a litany of the alleged crimes. Or
what I mean by not paying attention is they're not paying attention to anything outside of their own little confirmation bias bubble.
Yeah,
obviously they're paying infinite attention to what's going on within that bubble, but they're never getting out of it.
Yeah,
at all.
I mean, I went over the report of human rights rapporteur of some sort who investigated, and it looks like there was misconduct on both sides. There were probably some DNR pro-Russian secessionist dudes who fell into the hands of some of the groups like Azov Battalion and some others, whose rights were violated. I don't doubt that. And that's very serious. And I don't minimize that at all. But if you step back and look at the big picture, that was going on both sides. And there's some general criminality that becomes politicized in these situations. And, there's a lot of violence.
When Russia is committing these, massive atrocities, inevitably there are going to be reprisals. And I am not justifying them by any stretch of the imagination. I think that they all need to be investigated. And if anybody committed, war crimes on the Ukrainian side, they need to be prosecuted. just like the
Absolutely.
people who are committing war crimes on the Russian side need to be prosecuted. But reprisals in response to mass atrocities and a war of aggression, now escalating to a war of extermination, do not let us off the hook for engaging in equivalism about the situation, or worse yet, completely reversing it and portraying,
which is what
portraying Russia as the party, as the aggrieved party.
Yeah, and you can't help but, as somebody with legal training, I adamantly have to support the rights of the defendants of the Azov Battalion that is currently in custody of the Russian Federation. And they're already being an appalling case of abuse of defendants, because they're already calling for the death penalty against people in the Azov Battalion who may have had absolutely nothing to do with any human rights violations whatsoever at any time in any location. They just signed on for the Azov Battalion because they had a reputation of being badass, and they wanted to join the most militant badass regiment they could join. And so some of these people signed up, had nothing to do with any of these human rights violations that may have been perpetrated in the past by Azov Battalion. But apparently now Russia wants to prosecute these people, basically guilt by association. And that's the situation that these people are in. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, they are lionized as heroic, legendary defenders on the level of the Mossad defense of back in Jewish history, or other legendary defenders throughout history. So you've got a complete split in how people are looking at these Azov Battalion defendants. So it'd be interesting to see what role Amnesty International will play in terms of identifying some of these folks as political prisoners. Even though they're prisoners of war, they have rights under Geneva Convention, but apparently those rights are not going to be honored by the Russian Federation. And meanwhile, you have people like Sasha Skilichenko. I probably said her name wrong, but this is an artist and a musician and somebody who wrote very frankly about her personal struggle with depression, which takes a lot of guts. And this Sasha went out and, along with other feminist activists, and they came up with a strategy of taking price tags and attaching war facts on these price tags. Well, not only is she facing
this was in Russia, in St. Petersburg,
in Russia.
Right. So after the protest had been suppressed and this draconian law instated, which imposes a 15-year prison term for protesting the war, as a means of kind of subverting that, getting around that, she resorted to this kind of reality hacking tactic of actually going into supermarkets and where the price tags are on the shelves. She was putting not even anti-war propaganda so much as
facts.
Just facts about the civilian casualties in Ukraine and so on. Exactly. And now she's being prosecuted for this.
Well, not only is she being prosecuted, but her attorney pointed out that she has celiac disease and requires special diet, and she has struggled with mood disorder, and that she's not a flight risk. And this nasty judge just dismissed all that and characterized her as a flight risk. Where is she going to fly? Where's she going to run to? I mean, you can't escape Putin's Russia if you're facing charges. I seriously doubt anyone can really pull that off. And she doesn't seem like the kind of person who would. I mean, she's got so much courage. She's probably going to just face the time and do the time with great stand-up integrity and face the charges to make a point. I couldn't even imagine her wanting to duck out. I wouldn't blame her if she did, but I don't think she would have any intention. So she's being held without bail, which is ridiculous. And I think her trial comes up at the end of May.
Right. If you're looking for Russians to support, she's a Russian to support.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And there are others. And even Navalny, warts and all, he's no angel, but you know, you have to understand that he has shown great courage by returning to Russia, knowing full well he very likely would end up imprisoned or murdered by Putin. Putin poisoned him already.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, but Navalny, you know, as you say, he's got his own.
Yeah, he's got issues.
Warts, as it were. He's kind of a right-wing Russian nationalist himself. I'm much more enthused about all of the and concerned with the fates of the something like 10,000 anti-war protesters who were arrested in the aftermath of the invasion.
And we don't know what. I mean, maybe they're all going to get long prison terms. And the Russian jails are notorious. Trevor Reed was just released, and he was held, and they put him in a psychiatric lockdown with murderers and people with severe psychiatric disorders and propensities to violence.
And there's still the case of Brittany Griner,
who's still
aware of. Yeah.
And you hardly hear anything but crickets about her.
There's been some coverage. There's been some coverage.
Not very much, not as much as I would expect.
She's being held on a cannabis charge, as I'm sure you're aware.
I think it was vaping. I think.
Yeah, they supposedly found vape pens in her luggage as she was leaving Moscow at the airport, and she's been held incommunicado. And the drug laws in Russia are just, as you can imagine, just ridiculously harsh.
Well, it's just another way to oppress people and put people in fear of the government, which is the primary purpose of drug laws.
Exactly. I mean, finally, the United States now is beginning, even though, it's the states rather than some of the states, by no means all of them, but some of the states, at least, like New York and California, starting to New Jersey, Washington and Oregon, kind of taking the initiative and are sort of, the United States is beginning to, undo all of the damage of cannabis prohibition and the war on drugs. Russia is just, going whole hog into that police state dystopia.
Well, that's part of their whole shtick. Is the West?
It's a part of the whole shtick. It's a part of the whole fascistic
Western decadence
unfolding there. Yes.
One of the top military secessionist commander dudes was interviewed, and he said that one of the reasons for the secessionist militancy was because they had it up to here with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He actually said that
in the Donbass.
Yeah, and one of the Donbass top commander guys. I mean, that seems like a ridiculous reason to be wanting to be firing artillery rounds at each other, because you don't like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I really believe that most of the Russian soldiers actually like sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Well, who wouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, that's just ridiculous. But as far as,
it's also an echo of the same kind of, cultural conservative separatist movements, which are beginning to emerge in certain parts of Northern California and the Colorado Rockies now, where the old redneck establishment is alienated by the cannabis legalization and gay marriage and whatnot.
Yeah, you're not hearing a lot of this secessionism right now, but there was a time when it was being promoted a bit more. But the primary promoter was based in Russia. Did you know that? Oh yeah. This was a scandal. It was uncovered that one of the most vocal proponents of California secession was some dude that was set up in Russia.
Indeed, yeah, we got the same of the information on this.
Yeah, but he sort of receded. In fact,
it was a split the state initiative. They weren't talking about California seceding from the Union. It was a split the state.
There was discussion of both. There was both. But actually, there might be something to be said for getting more than 2 senators for the entire state of California. Thank you very much. Because, one of the serious problems in the United States, which really makes the United States not a full democracy, is the Electoral College, the 2 senators rule, the dark money rulings coming out of the Supreme Court year after year.
Obviously. And, I mean, I shudder to think what's going to be happening in this country. We could be, following Russia into fascism in 2024 very easily.
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
and then the real
Trump still
decision.
seems to be hegemonic in the Republican Party, and you've got all of these grim forebodings of the imminent overturn of Roe versus Wade. This horrific racist massacre just took place in Buffalo. I mean, this country continues to be. We took a little bit of an edge back from a little bit of a step back from the edge of fascism when Trump's attempt to steal the election was defeated, and there actually was a transition to a new administration 2 years ago.
But then we had January 6th, which was
exactly in spite of January 6th, exactly.
Which
but
reminds me of the beer hall.
We're kind of creeping back towards the edge again. It's a very, very.
I don't think we're creeping. I don't think we're creeping, man. I think we're in a slide, like when you're climbing a mountain on a snowfield and you fall and you have to use your ice axe to stop yourself from falling into a crevasse. I think we're actually sliding downhill very rapidly at this point. At least it appears that way today. Considering that earlier today there was yet another shooting.
Yes, in Texas.
Yeah, and
although that one does not seem to be "quote unquote" politically motivated as the one in Buffalo.
Well, I don't know. It may be not racially motivated, but I don't know that it wasn't as explicitly tied. I haven't heard anything about a manifesto and this.
Right, exactly. That's what I mean.
Theory. It's not as quite as explicit.
Right, it's a part of the whole general zeitgeist. That's why I use scare quotes. But yes.
Yeah, it's pretty great. But what's really shocking is that there could be so many people that will still vote for Donald Trump and his copycats. I talked to a guy the other day. It's admitted Trump's a jerk, but he's better than Biden because Biden is senile and Biden probably has Alzheimer's. And
where did you come into contact with this individual?
I just we rent storage property near each other, and over the years we've chatted. And
all right, so what other ground that we got to cover? Because it's 5 o'clock in the morning here in New York City, and I need to.
Oh my God! Well, we probably do need to wrap this up. We've covered quite a bit of territory tonight, considering, and I'm sure next time we get back together, we're going to have a lot more to talk about. I think this whole Hungary CPAC thing is begging for discussion by us or a counter vortex solo rant. I think it's a big development and warrants serious analysis. I'm reading Theo Horesh, and I'm about halfway through one of his books, and I will share some of his information, some of his views and links, and I'm sure that there will be plenty more to talk about, because we are really in a full-on 1930s, 1940s style world situation. So it's good to have you available, Bill. Your knowledge is very impressive, and your perspectives are pretty much right on.
I do my best.
All right. To be continued. Good night, Bill.
To be continued. Okay. Over and out, California. All right. I'm going to bed, man. I'm tired.
All right. Get some sleep, buddy.
Good night.